Hi everyone, thank you for coming to this session. I'm Yang Jing. If Chinese is just difficult for you to pronounce, just call me Allison. I'm very honored to be here today. Right now I'm in Hong Kong. It's already in the afternoon. And today I'm going to share my experience on how to or how not to fail at connecting game and art for a Maze Festival participants. I have this idea because of a recent game I made with my creative partner Alan Kwan. The name of the game is Forgetter, and you would see there I put in the subtitle saying it's produced by DSL Collection. It's an art collection. This game is very lucky to be entering in the digital moment genre for this year's Maze Festival, and the entire journey of the game itself and its afterlife somehow captured a lot of difficulties, dilemmas, and some of our own exploration or experiment in bridging art and game. I'll try to share a very short video of the game. I think there's no audio now for the better quality of the streaming, but you can get the basic idea. This is a first-person exploration game. The name is Forgetter, and as a player, you have a narrator, and then there's two other major voices who each represent a dead artist. Uh, in a future setting of a sci-fi company, which is called Mind Job, you can go into this dead artist's mind, like right now in the image. And here you can find and then try to destroy or not to destroy, it's up to you. They are very traumatized memory blocks. And some of the memories are intimate, some of them are very universal experiences for our generation of artists or contemporary artists in the world alike. So in this game, the most primary interaction or play is to destroy things. You can draw the impression of human architectures, furnitures, everyday objects, but most importantly, you can destroy art. And all these art are from the aforementioned French collection DSL. Uh, like this one is mostly artworks from China, like Chinese contemporary artists. So this is a brief look of the game. And let me go to the next slide here. So this is me. Our team is more art oriented than game. The other person who's not here today is Alan Kwan. He is a game artist. He's been doing this for years, and I'm mostly working on writing and curating art exhibitions with a focus in game art. And the collection we work with is like I mentioned, is a Paris-based collection, private one. They don't have a physical space, but they always want to share their artworks they collected over the years on virtual space. So I want to jump right in how we made the game and how it's connected to both game and art. On the conceptual level, for me as a curator, these are a few of the exhibitions I did. I gradually come to an idea that game and exhibition have a lot of similarities. To make them or visit them or play them, you can see a shared thread in it. For me, is information database and processor. Like this is a game I really liked to play when I was young, little. Pharaoh is an interactive management, resource management game, or a city, more like kingdom builder. Here, I think they hired or at least consulted a lot of Egyptianology scholars. So the entire game is like a knowledge database for things that happened in ancient Egypt, objects, art, culture, military, whatever. If you want to learn, you can learn a lot of English vocabularies that often is no use for today, but it's very fun. I visited an Egyptian, what's it called, the Egyptology museum in Italy years ago, and I saw basically the same thing. It's instead of virtual properties, it's physical materials, but they're all barrels of information. So again, museum or art space can work as an information database or processor. So these are the ideas I have in mind before I made this game. And then the opportunity came to us. I think 2 or 3 years ago, this collections had Sylvain Levy went for me. They were trying to do digital display for artworks long before the pandemic hit us. Previously, they've tried to make such kind of VR museum, which I think is supported by HTC's Vive, and then they want to do something again. But like I mentioned, in our team, I was a contact person. We have very little experience in making virtual art space, but we're more interested or addicted to video game. Thus, we came of the idea that we don't want to make a virtual museum, but we want to make a game because essentially it can be the same thing. As long as we meet these two quests, one is to display their artworks inside the game, and the artwork should be in the most prominent interactive part of the game, and then the story of the game could be or should be also related somehow to contemporary art. We had a few ideas, which we deserted earlier. One is to steal contemporary art so that we can mock the price system in the contemporary art industry, or a memory archaeologist game, which should be an RPG, which has a love triangle relationship that wants to highlight some of the real figures like artists, gallerists, collectors, their intensive dynamics with each other. But eventually, we arrive at the idea of Forgetter, precisely because of the main concept I had in my mind, that we want to make a game that's somehow is a database for contemporary art in China, but also contemporary artists' living conditions in China and maybe abroad too. So that came the original, like the first step of Forgetter. We built a museum, but for players who don't know about this layer of the orange story, I guess they don't have to know. The game itself is the museum itself. We have different floors. First is a sci-fi or IT company in the future. It's more physical. So you go in there, you have a sense of reality, then you go to that artist's brain. And in the brain, you go into a set of hyper-realistic or impossible architectures and interact with things. And then you can see their interaction, and you have a moral or aesthetic choices, like what to do, what not to do. And it would influence the ending or the future of the player in the end of the game. On the production level, as I mentioned, Alan has been working on this for a long time, and he's most interested in making impossible architectures. So we were brainstorming some stories about how artists are suffering or trying to survive in today's economy and also geographical conditions. So he made, again, impossible architectures. This is a museum shaped like a tumor and exists in air. And this is an attic of the artist's childhood memory, which you can peek into other rooms. A forest that has a lot of really traumatic impressions of parents and siblings. And this is the more realistic setting of the IT company that's Manjob, where everything happened. At the same time, we are two people team, so the productivity is very limited. And we try to find a lot of ready-made. I like the idea of ready-made because in art we use it a lot, but in game, it's the same. There are so many 3D assets we can find online. As long as we pay them or we credit them, we can use it. The only problem is we're making at least half of the game is set in the 1980s to 1990s China, so we don't have a lot of available options to 3D assets because most of them represents a US or European, I guess, realistic style. The most relevant we can find is the assets that are tagged with USSR or former Germany or GDR. And then we have ready-made art. Again, this time it's digital versions of real existing physical art, like the one I'm showing you on the screen. I think it's the upper right part. And to make the games more authentic in terms of the era it tries to represent, I also exploited my families, friends, and I got a lot of photos like this one on the lower right corner is my parents' photo. So we put these things around our game space to make it more immersive, so to speak, or more real, uh, real as a memory space. And narratively, we added some audios. Somehow I cannot play it for the streaming, but these audios are representing the remaining consciousness of the dead artist. So when you do things, they would have some kind of reaction. And we forced a kind of one-dimensional or one-way communication, because in a game setting, we said the artist could only say things, but they cannot hear things. So basically it's a monologue, and the player's character, which should be from the future, can commentate on that too. So this is basically the production level of things. I think we managed to do the previous two part relatively smoothly and successfully in some level, because we finished it in 10 months. And we did this work with the French collection in a way an artwork is commissioned. So we have the budget, and we have a timeline, and we have a goal that we have to deliver. But then we didn't realize we were making a game. So there's a business side of things. And to be very honest, we didn't plan very well, or we didn't plan for this at all. We basically left no time for doing any kind of marketing or PR, and we managed to squeeze some time to do some DIY things. Like we did play test, mostly around our friends who are game designers, artists, or friends of friends, to get a lot of quality control, but also to get a feeling like who likes to play our game. But again, it's limited to a very small circle. And something we actually got a lot of help from professional game designers who work in middle or big scale game companies. They want to connect us to publishers, but then they said we have to probably make some compromise and make more contents or do some calculation about aesthetic style, things like that. And this is our first time to do a game which is going to be launched onto Steam. So we have something which served as setback for us in trying to connect to the game industry before the release. I guess it's very typical for artistic working process. There's ego, there's fake, fair, and also there's 10 months production fatigue. So, and we need to deliver the game on time. So we said, no, we're going to do it by ourselves. What we did is we tried to exploit it the most functions, like free ones on every tool. Like I wrote to so many curators, journalists, and managed to get some coverage report, and also running. I really suck at this, some kind of social networks, and these all helps. But the biggest difference comes from game festival, like this, like a game festival with put us in a community that's already there and exposed to them. So before AMAs, the only game festival we participated is by accident. This is a physical one, an offline one in Beijing. I think in May, in 2021. We were kind of lucky because China is one of the only place where you can do a lot of things offline. Although we have to sacrifice for 21 days quarantine in a really lousy hotel, mostly me. But it was really amazing that we managed to become the longest queuing lines for the entire indie game part. And we didn't expect this at all because we were so scared that not scared. We had this impression that we are some kind of art game and normally people wouldn't really like to play it. But in terms of the feedbacks we get on the site and afterwards from these players and people who heard about our game after this fair, because of this fair, it's actually very positive or at least encouraging messages. And also the other lucky thing is we have got a lot of contacts with game distributors and platforms, and they informed us that although our game is quite art house in a way, but there is what they call a need for aesthetic or cultural content in the general market. Like players are not as um, what's the opposite of high taste? Players want things that are artsy or abstract or experimental too. And some game distributors or platforms are also looking for such content. But of course, they would have more demands, and only it's not as scary as we or hard as we thought it's negotiable. And also, they could have managed to offer us some kind of support, technical or in terms of media exposure or even financially. But they already released the game, so this is a kind of hindsight wisdom. But I think although maybe we wasted the opportunity to exploit both art system and game system to make this game better and more known to the public. Important lessons are learned, and I summarize them here. I always want to compare art industry and the game industry because these are where the most creative minds usually reside in today's society globally. In a way, we are all making creative contents, but somehow a game made in art and game made in game industry always look different. Why is that? So I explore the differences in both systems from the journey of a gather, and I wrote them down here. In terms of initial funding and support on crazy ideas as ours, in game industry, it's very limited. You have to show investors or publishers or at least fans, you have a proven records of success. Most of the time is measured by income, revenue, or at least click rates. But in art industry, it's more likely. Like people are very impressed with original ideas and experimental ways of doing things. However, in terms of technical and marketing support, game industry is a place people who are like us should be not intimidated to contact because they're much more resourceful. In art, although because of the pandemic, a lot of institutions, especially the one have physical space, are trying to converge or transform to virtual space or metaverse, whatever they call it. They're very limited. They have to deal with a lot of internal bureaucratic or technical limitations. But from my experience, most of these museums actually are looking forward to have some kind of external help. And also museums tend to have much less direct contact with players or visitors. The crowds who go to museum are already a filtered group. In terms of whereas in game industry, they have a much more widely available players and visitors who can be involved in the production or in the sales circle earlier or later, but they're there. And in art industry, the most important thing is originality. In game industry, it's the same, but at the same time, the game should be playable. We received a lot of feedback. Some of them are quite nice, like they recognize our, I think, art value or saying we're thought-provoking. Some of them find a kind of spiritual refuge or refugee in it. But also, at least for me, at the earlier stage, I was very I avoided to look at the comments which criticizes us. For instance, saying we have some free job issues, or there's some glitches, or we should have more contents, or at least we should have a saving function, not to force people to play right through for an hour. At that time, I want to, as a nature, to define ourselves. Oh, we are more art, but then in terms of user friendly, I think maybe if we get more resource, and we should go out and get more resource, the playability problem could be bettered or enhanced. The other thing is, in terms of production circle, if you get a commissioned work from the art institutions, it's usually short. And I guess that's partially due to in art, people are still a bit of unfamiliar with game production. Uh, they think it's a expected thing, like everything could be measured, predetermined, planned, and they expect it to be delivered very soon with very limited resources. Whereas in game, it's I think everyone accepts like making a game could be a very long production cycle. Oh, sorry, I misspelled cycle. This is especially true for the user-friendly part. The production cycle is short for artists because it's more, the games are more artist-centered, so you do what you want, and you don't have to spend so much energy and thoughts and concerns on how it's received. So this would cut off a lot of time. Whereas in game, users are so important, and you have to engage them and talk to them and test them or let them test you all the time. I think it's not necessarily a bad thing. Um, I really like the participatory kind of art. So most of the things I make, I write or I curate, I tend to leave at least 1/3 or sometimes half of the content empty so that the latecomers or the visitors can fill it with their own imagination and thoughts. And this would require a more understanding or tolerant mind from the art world. But in games, it's very normal already. And so the entire journey so far for the game forgetter is like a painful but important lesson for me to know in detail about why art game and game are so different. But I think in a very near future, the bridge could be the gap or bridge could be filled, and there are a more art house game for most of the audience in the market out there. And I think that's the end of the presentation for me. And I saw some questions about the game. The game is on Steam, so you can just type Forgetter, Forgetter, and it's there already. Thank you. If you don't have any questions for me, I guess maybe that's it for this session. But feel free to contact me on YouTube here or Discord. All right, thank you so much. Have a nice day.